Great, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. Like some of you in this room, possibly, I was also not born in the United States of America. I am South African, both culturally and legally, I guess. Yet here in New Jersey, I have made a home for myself, and particularly at Kane University. So now, as a member of this new Kane community, myself, Sarah Compion, the director of the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies, where Latin American Studies is housed, along with Dr. Jonathan Mercantini, who's the dean for the College of Liberal Arts, and then our various faculty from history and political science and Latin American Studies, as well as student government. Thank you very much. Welcome you to this first in our college lecture series, which is focused on life in America now at the moment. So moderating today's session, which is the first in this series, titled Dreaming of an Immigration Solution in the Trump Era, What Do We Do with DACA, is of course our distinguished Latin American scholar, Dr. Frank Freire. He's Associate Professor of History. Welcome everybody, can you come in? He's Associate Professor of History. He teaches Latin American Studies and Latino Studies courses. Gosh, he covers the range of the continent from Cuba and Brazil and Mexico, all the way through to Latinos living right here in the United States. He started out his career as a journalist and put his writing skills to very good use, has published a couple of books and a number of excellent articles. His emphasis is on Fuengia Batista. I know I screwed up the name, thank you. And Dr. Freire is great. He serves beyond the academy as well. As a member of our community, he's on the board of the Fair Share Housing Center, the Latino Action Network, and he directs the Latino Coalition here in New Jersey. So joining Dr. Freire on stage, we have some wonderful panelists. Alva Aguilar, yeah. He's himself a Daca recipient and has taken the course of civil disobedience. He's an activist in his own fight for citizenship rights. Yemi Hernandez is a high school student still. She's a senior. She's preparing her college application. Go Cougars, hint, hint. But she's a little uncertain of her own status here, given the changes to the DACA policies, right, or potential changes. On the other side of Dr. Freire, we have Ana Ventura. She's a bilingual paraprofessional, and she is based at Freehold Regional High School, and she's also a teacher and a mentor for adult ESL. Really a wonderful asset to have with us today on the stage. And then finally, we are honored to be joined by attorney Ana Yangelmo. She is a human rights and immigration law practitioner. She's based right here in our own Elizabeth. Herself an immigrant, she cares very deeply for her clients, but she also will give you quality counsel representation and defense, and she's a valuable asset, extremely knowledgeable, not only to the community, but also has been to Kane University as well and has attended numerous classes where she talks. So with that, it's my pleasure to hand over to Dr. Freire, who will do most of the moderating of today, and to the panelists in what I hope will be an excellent, I know will be a fascinating discussion. Thank you.
So thank you, Sarah, for those kind words. I want to welcome you all here. Many of you are my students. I thank you. It's great to see your familiar faces here. And so the whole idea of having this talk on DACA began last year. In the last academic year, we had a speaker series of talks on the impact of the Trump administration on a variety of issues in our nation. And so we wanted to follow it up this year with a series of talks. And so I've been talking with Dr. Mercantini, the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts, and we had been conversing what sort of program to present. And then Trump on September 5th announced the end of the DACA program, and through the lives of the DACA recipients. DACA is an acronym for Deferred Action for Early Childhood Arrivals, DACA. And so these are folks who received a permanent, or I should say a temporary reprieve from any threat of deportation in 2012 when President Obama established this DACA program. He did it through executive order because the United States Congress could not agree on a path and a policy with regards to immigration. So the program was established at that time. Trump made immigration a centerpiece of his election campaign with the wall and other issues, and he had pledged to end the DACA program. When Trump was elected, he met with President Obama at the time, and one of the things that Obama said to him was, you know, before you do anything, give careful thought to this. This is one of the programs I really care about. So for quite a number of months in the Trump presidency, there was no action taken on the DACA program. And just to add flesh to that, these are folks who were brought over as young children by their parents without documentation into the United States. So many of them, you know, could have been like some of our panelists when we get to hear from them, were brought over as young as 1 year old. So these folks were brought over, they didn't choose to come over. So there are about 800,000 or so DACA folks in the country, and I don't recall now what the number is in New Jersey. I suspect, I was at a meeting at Rutgers University when President Barkey spoke there about it, and he estimated there were about 500 at Rutgers. I estimate, you know, from that roughly 200 or so here at Kean University. This is just my sense of it from having the classes that I teach here and over the years. Anyway, when President Trump made this announcement on September 5th that he was suspending the DACA program in 6 months, he was going to give the Congress 6 months to resolve this issue, and then it's unclear what's going to happen if after 6 months have passed and they don't reach a resolution, what will happen to the folks who are in the DACA program. So, as I said, I know we have students here who are DACA recipients whose lives are deeply affected by this. So after talking with Dr. Mercantini, we concluded that, hey, this is a program that we need to reach out to our student body, let them know that we're here as a university to engage in a dialogue, in a discussion, and to provide information for the community in general, and then, of course, those who may have been affected by that policy decision. So that was the genesis of how we arrived at this panel. I have the pleasure of knowing all of the 3 DACA recipients here on the panel with me. The distinguished lawyer, attorney I met only recently, but the 3 panelists I have known, some of them for quite some time. So let me briefly state how I've met them and how we invited them here, and then they will tell you a little bit about their stories, and then at the end, Anna will tell us about the legal aspects and where we are with that. So to my left, immediate left, is Anna Ventura. Anna and I met years ago. I've been involved in this struggle for comprehensive immigration reform for about 20 years. One of the efforts that we took part in here in New Jersey was to get in-state tuition for the Dreamer kids. Right, and we achieved that some years ago. Anna was a peer leader at a local high school, and I was introduced to her, and we both drove up to Trenton, or down to Trenton, and rallied for that legislation. Since then, my daughter and her have become good friends as they attended the same high school. And that's the thing about the DACA situation. These are not some abstract, this is not some abstraction in the ether, right? These are real folks being affected. These are real people. For them, this is their country. This is the nation they've grown up in. Many of them have never been since they left Mexico, wherever they came from, have never been back there. So anyway, this is how I know Anna, and we've created a warm friendship between us over the years. She's a regular participant in our Latino festival in our local community. So that's Anna. Then to my immediate right is Yami Hernandez. As Sarah mentioned, Yami is a high school student thinking about applications, has her whole life ahead of her, has big dreams. She'll tell you about that. They're really exciting dreams. And yet, her DACA renewal ends in about 2 years. So what happens then? Yami came at 1 year old, as a 1-year-old. So what happens then? And then to my further right is Alvaro Aguilar. I met Alvaro only about 3-4 weeks ago. We were planning a informational clinic and for DACA recipients to see if we can get some renewed. And Alvaro he told us his story at this meeting, and he had taken an additional step. For many DACA folks, it shows a tremendous courage to say that you're from that community, right? And because it's announcing, hey, I'm vulnerable, but I want to convey this information nonetheless. So, and then Alvaro took another step to say, I want to, in the tradition of Martin Luther King Jr., take part in civil disobedience about the ill treatment of immigrants and DACA recipients. So I was fascinated with the story, and I said, wow, that would be great to have him tell us a little bit about that. And then Anna has a practice in Elizabeth who's doing a lot of great work. I've spoken to her recently with immigrants, and this is the core of her legal mission. So I don't want to go on much longer about me. I want to turn it over to them. So I thank you all for coming. I want to make a quick thanks to the Dean, Mercantini, as I mentioned before, Janice Murray Lowry, who's the Vice President of Student Affairs, for funding the program, Katrina Bozeman, Scott Snowden for the posters and the marketing, Mickey Kaufman, who set this up here, the chair of the history department, who has always been encouraging of our efforts here, Beth Hyde, has done a fantastic job, and I thank her for that. So, and I also want to acknowledge James Castiglione, who is the president of the KFT, the Kane Federation of Teachers. They have been very supportive of DACA recipients, and so I thank our union for that, for their efforts in this regard. So let me start then in terms of turning over the panel to our DACA recipients with Yami Hernandez. Yami, if you'd tell us a little bit about your story.
Hello, my name is Yami Hernandez. I am a senior at Freehold High School. I am 17 years old. I'll begin by telling you all my story and how it came to be. I was born on January 16 of 2000 on a Sunday. My parents had the idea of bringing me to the U.S. and being born into the U.S. Unfortunately, that did not happen. My mom gave birth to me in Tijuana, which is literally by the border of U.S. and Mexico. I was born in Tijuana, Mexico. A few days afterwards, my dad had to leave us. So the next day, basically, after I was born, he left. He left to the U.S. so that he could get money in order for me and my mom to cross the border. After a year, my dad raised enough money, and he told my mom that he thought it was better for me to stay with my grandmother in Mexico. Gladly, my mom did not choose that. She decided to cross the border with me. It was a lot easier for little kids to cross the border at the time. So me and my cousin, she was 6 years old while I was 1 year old, we crossed the border. We were, a lady made us, cross the border as if we were her children. So, we were kind of like, faked IDs for us. And my mom, she had to cross the border walking. I arrived to Los Angeles a lot earlier than my mom did. At that time, my mom, lost her way in the desert. She did not know how many days she was lost, but she was lost for several days. I was in Los Angeles, and, my mom breastfed me, so they would give me milk and bread, but I would not eat it because, I did not know how to, chew or drink milk from a cup, When my mom finally found her way to me, she found me, really skinny because I hadn't ate for days. The lady who brought us to Los Angeles, like, my mom didn't know her, so she was taking a huge risk, but she knew that somehow I would get to her and I would get, there safe. She just, pray to God that I would be fine, and, I was fine. But, she got there. I was skinny. I was, like, really hungry, crying for her, and, that's how we got to the U.S. I was really tiny, so, like, I don't remember anything, from Mexico or, I was raised in the United States, basically, and I consider myself, American. But, as a child, since I was little, my parents didn't hide my status. They would tell me, you're special, you're someone that doesn't have, you're not legal, you're an illegal, person in the United States. And I don't like using the word illegal because I consider myself a human being. We're all human beings, and we shouldn't be, told, oh, you're this and you're that. I don't like that, but, my mom told me, you're an illegal, alien in the United States. They never, hid that from me. It was hard growing up, because I would be told at times, you will never become anything because you have no documentation, because, you weren't born here, you will not become anything. I would be told that several times as a, little girl growing up, and that had a huge impact on me as I was growing up. Thank God my mom was there, my dad was there, and raised me, in the best way that they could, and always taught me that I could become whatever I wanted to be. So now I find myself being here a senior, and, Trump saying that he's going to terminate DACA, and it's really crazy for me right now because, I want to go to college. I want to become an immigration attorney and, eventually maybe go into the FBI. I have dreams. I have goals in life, like you all, like we're people, we're human beings. We shouldn't be called illegal. We shouldn't be told that because without, we're not legal, we can't do anything. We're human beings, and, we have goals, aspirations, and at this moment, I find myself uncertain of what could eventually happen in my life. I'm gonna apply to colleges. I'm gonna do that because, I want to fight for this. But I find myself that if it does terminate, like, what's gonna happen? What is my life gonna become? Like, I have a license, I got my license, at 16. My mom cried in front of me because she was just full of joy of the fact that because of DACA, I could do things like a normal person in this country. But now it's like, what's gonna happen? We don't know. And the only thing I could think of right now is to fight, because we do have a voice. We do have a way of fighting back peacefully, not violently. because our words are weapons of good. You know, speaking out, helping your, your people, because we're all, considered people, we're human beings, and I don't consider myself illegal because I said this before, I'm a human being. And, I've had wonderful mentors in my life like Frank and others who've taught me throughout life that, it is worth fighting. It is worth using your voice. It is worth telling your story, because I have been told that I can't do anything, but here I am. I've done several things throughout my life that I am really proud of. I'm here and I've represented my school several times. It's just an honor being here. But, my advice to you all is to fight with us because, united we are more stronger. United we are better. We have a voice. We have to use it. If we just stand here and not, fight, then we're going to just be thrown out like we're nothing, and we are people. And I know that, we feel like we are from here, then we're not from here. We're like pushed around by, a clash of cultures that we live in. But, my mentality is that if we don't fight, then we're just basically giving up. And my thought is to never give up, to always fight, because it's worth fighting and doing something before it's too late. Right now, Trump is saying so many things, 6 months. Yeah, after 6 months, how do we know that Congress will find a solution to this problem? How do we know that? He wants to terminate it after like 6 months, supposedly. We have lives, we have a job right now. We all have jobs and we have aspirations, but are you all united as one to fight with us? Because I'm here to give you all a voice, and the rest of the DACA recipients from my school, I'm here and I'm representing them because they too are fighting a way or another by using their voice, their art, their music. They're all fighting somehow, and I think we all should unite as one and keep fighting some way or another.
So thank you, Yami. So I wanted to turn over now to Alvaro for his insights.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alvaro, and I'm 29 years old. I came here when I was 14. Well, I want to say, I don't know, I felt, I don't know how to explain, but her story is similar to mine, and I will share something that I never share because the way I grew up, it's very personal for me, and I always keep it to myself. But today I'm gonna share to you guys a little bit, and so I came here when I was 14, and the reason I came here, it's because as a child, I don't know, I was like maybe from 3 years old to 14. I received a lot of physical abuse from my dad. He used to beat me up pretty much, All I remember was like a lot for everything. So when I was like 12 years old, I decided to quit school and just to find a job, to just not to be at my house. So it was very depressing and sad, to be at home and see all these fights, and he will tell me, I think you are old enough to get food or clothes for yourself. So that's the reason it came to my mind that I had to come to the United States which my sister was here already. She's the one that brought me here. And so then, I crossed the border, just like Amy, but I was 14. I had to walk on the desert for like 3 nights and 3 days, something like that. It was a long way. And I came here, I had opportunity to go to high school. I had a lot of support from my teachers, counselors, and a lot of people. And I didn't know anything. Over there in Mexico, all I did was just to go to school, and I learned nothing. I just knew the sign of plus and minus. And my teacher used to ask me, add a sign of plus and minus equal what? I was like, what is that? I don't know that. So I knew nothing, and but they helped me a lot, and I had an opportunity to go to apply for now. Even though it wasn't documented, there is on my high school there is this person that gives scholarship to undocumented students. And I had a lot of support from my teachers that I had the opportunity to go to Brookdale Community College and try to make my dreams become true, even though I was undocumented. So I also was one of the 26 or 27 civil disobedience at Fifth Avenue, New York, Trump Tower. The reason I did that was because I have a lot of friends. I have a lot of friends in my community that are documentary recipients, but they're just too scared. They are just very scared to do something. And I'm always the kind of guy that gives always the first step. So I said to myself, I think somebody has to do something, and that has to be me. So that's the reason I contacted Cosecha. That's the organization that fights for the rights for like the 11 million immigrants, fighting for respect and dignity. And I decided to go and get arrested. When I went there, I told a lot of my friends that I was gonna get arrested, and if anyone wanted to go with me, just to be there, that they didn't have to get arrested. But they all were scared. They told me that some are in college, some are driving, some are parents, and they told me that they didn't want to risk any of that. Some of them actually told me, you're gonna go there and you may gonna get deportation, like you're gonna get in trouble. So, I went and I got arrested, and I realized that it was something great. Like, first of all, the message was sent because it was on TV everywhere. It wasn't supposed to be that big. I mean, I thought I was just gonna go out there and take a couple of pictures. People were gonna take pictures and stuff. But when I was sitting there, yeah, it was actually amazing to see all, like, the hundreds of people around us screaming, like the feeling was great. Like, and then, I went to jail, and I went to jail for 3 hours, and I actually was in jail, and I was like very happy. I had this feeling that I finally did something that made me feel good. And I got out of jail, and they got me out of jail, and it was amazing how all of my friends gave me phone calls, text messages, like if I was fine, if I was out, if I needed something. And I realized that I did the right thing for them to get inspired to do something. And since then, I decided to start getting more involved to the community, to get like I need to get more training to inspire people. Like, because there is a lot of them out there that want to do something like me, but they just don't know how to start. And I want them to know that I'm here, and I know the people like Cosecha, that they can get oriented, like what to do or do something about it. Because I mean, I love this country. First, you know, I feel like I'm home. I've been here half of my life for 15 years. And I have a lot of respect for Trump, you know. I like him, you know, like, but what he's doing is not right, you know. Like, I respect the guy, like, he's very smart and everything. But what he's doing is not right, and we need to do something about it, you know. I don't know how many documented we have here, but it's time to do something. It's time to get together and do something. I don't know if any of you are interested of getting involved in like Cosecha or something like that. You can ask me and ask any of us, and we can tell you where to go or what to do. Because, and I also want to recall that let's not all the documented, let's not just fight for the DACA thing, but it's for all the 11 million immigrants in the country. Because we are a big part. We are hard worker people, and I think we deserve the respect and dignity for all. And, you know, I mean, I think that's it. Thank you for.
So next to my immediate left is Ana Ventura. Ana?
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you once again, Frank, for inviting me, and the Keene University staff who put this out. It's a pleasure to be here, and students, staff who are here, thank you for taking that time to come out. And if you don't know what DACA is, you know, find out what DACA is, or just hear our stories. And I'm sure that we all had similar stories. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. I'll share a little bit about me before DACA ever existed, where I was after DACA, I obtained DACA, and then how I am right now with the situation of, you know, terminating DACA. So I am from Mexico City. I was born there in 1991. I was there till 8 years and a half, until the summer of 1999. It was June when my parents probably made that one of the toughest decisions they have ever made, and that was to bring my brother, my sister, and myself to the United States. And that was a tough decision because that meant that we were going to be leaving everything, our house, our family, our friends, our culture, everything, to start a new life. And I remember my parents were here before my sister and I arrived. So they were here about 2-3 years before, and when they called us and told us, we're sending to get you guys, you know, I was just like, but why? Weren't you guys supposed to come back? You said you were only gonna be gone for 3 years. And she said, well, 2 reasons. There's a better education here, and we can have financial freedom. And I have no idea what that means, but I just heard financial, and I was like, well, maybe I just get more toys or more things. I don't know what that means, but sure. So then comes June, we say our goodbyes, our farewells to my family, my friends, and we take off. No idea what it meant to actually come. I had no idea what way or shape or form I was gonna get into the United States. I just know that Mom and Dad had sent us with some sort of people to bring us in here. And just like many of my DACA recipients and a lot of immigrants, crossing the United States is probably a very challenging and paralyzing and traumatic event that happens to us. And for me, my story is I was 8.5 years old. It took me about 2 months to get to this country. We tried different ways to cross the border. I remember they would tell us we would try this place. If we couldn't get through this place, we would try to this place. I'm 8.5 years old, and all they tell me is, if you get tired, let us know. We'll have one of these guys just carry you. And I'm like, okay. And I remember just telling myself, why am I gonna get tired? Well, 9.5 hours later in the desert, under the heat, with snakes, under bushes, and with very little water. And we were, my sister and I were the only children in there, so we were the only ones that were getting fed, but we were being fed very little. When we finally thought we were making it to a destination, well, we got caught. So then they say, it's okay, don't worry, we'll try another way. This way will be a 15-minute walk. And I was like, well, why couldn't you take us to the 15-minute walk before? Why did you make me walk 9.5 hours? So we go on at midnight, a couple days later. Well, there was a huge, huge fence. They told a guy who had no idea who he was, they said, you're tall, we're gonna help you, and you're gonna jump over, and then the little one, you're gonna grab her, and then we'll send the other little one. That was my sister. And the guy said, okay. So he gets down, big bars, and then they carry me, they push me, he holds me, and then I just see the lights, and I hear them knocking. Immigration patrol, just get down, don't say anything. And 8.5 years old, I have no clue what's going on. And it's dark, I throw myself, I get in the car, and they start asking me questions. I'm with a stranger who's telling me to tell immigration officers that he's my uncle, but yeah, I don't know your name. So I'm like, what is going on? And from then, basically they lost track of me. I had no idea who to call. I mean, I know who mom and dad was. Now, when my parents told me they were in the United States, they said they were in New York. I guess that was just an easier way to say New Jersey, I don't know. So they're telling me, where are your parents? And I'm like, New York. Where in New York? I don't know. New York, New York. I don't know. What, do you know a town? I don't know. Freehold, New York? I don't know. So they're not finding Freehold, New York. They're not finding my parents' name. They have no clue. On the other end, my mother got a phone call by the coyote's wife and tell her, we lost your daughter in the desert. So now my mom and my father are freaking out because they're thinking, now this 8-year-old and a half is walking in the desert. Thankfully, after a month, somehow it just dawned on me. I went from foster house to crazy experiences that I saw that I never thought I would see. And every time that it would be night, I would just cry. I guess I was younger, and I just wanted to know what was happening to me. And they were older girls, and they were mean girls, and some of them were nice. And one of the mean girls were like, you're never going to leave here. They have forgotten about you. And that's why I would cry at night. But thankfully, after almost a month, it dawned on me, wait, I know a number. I memorized my favorite cousin's phone number because I promised her that when I got to the United States, I would call her. So I went to the lady, and I was like, I remember her phone number. So I did. They called her. Finally, they got in contact with my parents. My dad had to fly back to Mexico, get me, and cross one more time. And so I crossed 3 times, and finally the 3rd time I made it. But as an 8.5-year-old, I remember things that I saw, like things that I saw on the way there, things that I saw on my way here. I mean, when I mean things that I should have not seen. Some of the coyotes raping the girls, some of the girls doing drugs. It was definitely not. So when I got to the United States, I just remember I didn't want to be alone. My mom took me to a store to buy me clothes. She told me, hold on, I'm gonna be right back. I'm gonna get you another size. And she didn't come back in 1 minute, and I was already crying, freaking out. So talking to the lady in Spanish, she had no idea what I was saying, but I was very traumatized. So it was definitely a very traumatizing experience. I know there's people that go through worst, and now that I'm older, I'm actually thankful for it. I'm thankful for it because it really shaped me and molded me to who I am and who I'm going to be. Because on my way through all of that, 2 things were in my head. I was going to have a better education, and I was going to have more toys because my mom said she was going to have more money. Because we couldn't have enough toys in Mexico. We were very, only Christmas could only have certain things. So that was like the 2 main things. And I'm very fortunate that I come from a family that they value education a lot. So when my parents got here, they said, you didn't suffer, we didn't suffer, so that you don't have an education. Because we're poor, we don't have anything, we're undocumented. So if tomorrow anything happens to us, in any way, form, or shape, we know that you have an education. But there was a big obstacle, and that was not having papers, being undocumented. So growing up, I had a lot of great mentors, a lot of great teachers. Actually, one of the teachers now teaching here, she's my former ESL teacher from 2nd grade, because I arrived here in 2nd grade. And I remember her just saying, just keep working hard, learning English. And I remember second year old, I grew up in Monmouth County, and Monmouth County did not have a lot of Hispanics in 1999. It was me and a Puerto Rican, and then my ESL teacher. So it was a very cultural challenge. There was a cultural shift that I needed to get adapted, not just the language, but I remember being second grade, and I guess the teacher was playing the rules, and kids were raising their hands, and I'm like, why are they raising their hands? And it was just awkward. So one day I see people raising their hands, so I'm raising my hand. The teacher calls on me, and I'm like, I don't know. What is she saying? I don't know. I'm just raising my hand because everybody's raising their hand. And I remember calling under the desk, and I don't know what she was saying, but I saw she was saying come, right? Universal sign for come. She was doing this. And I said, no, Sandy McBride, Miss McBride, she had to go get my ESL teacher. So growing up was definitely tough, and I remember being very upset at my parents. I refused to learn English because I was mad what happened to me at 8.5 years. I didn't want to come. I told my mom, I didn't want to come. Why do you have to make me go through that? I didn't want to come. So definitely a big change. But because of that change, I grew up as an American. I learned to be an American. So when people are telling me, you can have a job, you can go to school, but why not? And it was very tough growing up, but I remember it was very hushy-hush. You don't tell anybody you're undocumented, you go to school, you do your job, because one day there's going to be something. There's going to be a law, you're going to have papers, and I have so many mentors, so many coworkers, so many teachers that told me that. And I did. I was like, I have to keep pursuing. At that time in middle school, and I wanted to be an immigration lawyer. But there was no way, coming out of high school, I was going to go to law school. There was no way. No money, nothing. No financial aid, no loans, no nothing. So I was like, okay, I'll take it short by short. I graduated from Rico Touch High School in 2010. I decided to continue to go to Brookdale. I started Brookdale in the fall of 2010 and did not finish Brookdale in 2015, so that was 2 years ago. It was a huge gap because my parents, they weren't financially stable. What a shocker. So that means they give me the option, either you wait for us to have the money or you put yourself through school. And thankfully, through my former ESL teacher, who's like a second mother to me, we keep in touch. She said to me, Anna, you go work, whatever you can get at work, waitress, don't be picky about your job. Get a job and get yourself through school, even if it's one class. And that's exactly what I did. And thankfully, in June 15, 2012, she calls me and she says, where are you at? And I'm like, I'm working. I was selling knives. Vector marketing, Cutco, maybe some of you students get it here. Got through school through that. Best job ever. They gave me the best opportunity because I was undocumented, they didn't care. And thankfully to them and to my mentors, after I got DACA, so many doors open. So many doors open through the mentors there. In June of 2012, my teacher calls me, she said, did you see the news? I remember seeing the news, calling my mom. I cannot hear. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, are you saying I'm gonna have a social and I'm gonna be able to drive? Because I was driving, but I did have to pay over $2,000 to fly myself to another state that would allow undocumented students or undocumented people to drive because they don't ask for a social. So I had to go all the way to Washington State to get a license because I wasn't gonna let my friends know my status quo. It was just not happening because that's who I was before. I was very fearful to say I was a DACA. Well, there was no DACA back then, but I was just not happening. Yeah, I'm a resident, and I didn't talk about it. So this is my first time coming out and saying I'm a DACA recipient, and I'm pretty proud. And ever since DACA, since 2012, so many doors. Currently, I'm a paraprofessional at Coles Lane High School, which is part of the Frisco Regional High School. I got that position through my mentors because of the experience that I have had at Cutco. From there, that opened up another door to teach ESL for adults, and I keep getting so many offers. I remember one of the jobs that I got, and I remember for the first time, I felt invisible. And my vector manager has said to me, Anna, we love you, but we tell all of our students after 2 years being with us, you need to go interview, you need to go find other interviews. and find out what's out there. Because we want to know that you're here because you want to be here and you're not here just for the money. So I did. I ended up going to Pumas, and the guy ended up loving me. I was at that time 19 years old, and he offered me a position for, I forgot the title, but it was right under the, I guess like a store manager. And at that time, it was like almost $40,000. I was 19 years old, and I was pretty flattered. I gave them my TIN number, quote unquote, my social security to me. That's what I told them. It didn't go through. So I had to turn down that position by giving some lame excuse. And I remember going back home and I'm like, man, I'm worth a lot more. I'm worth a lot more than some people at my school, and I know it. And sometimes you have those friends or those classmates that you know they're just there to mess around. They're not looking to do something with their life. So I was just like, man, I remember like being so mad. So with DACA came, so many opportunities keep opening. Last month when we heard about Trump, we were actually in a staff meeting at Kolsnik, and I turned around to my coworker and I was like, he ended it. He ended it, and I cannot believe it. And in the first time, I've been in this country for 18 years. In the first time, I felt fear. I don't think I actually felt fear when I was undocumented, when I was under the shadows. I didn't feel that. But that moment, and my coworker's here, so I cried, and I was like, they ended. And it's not that I get deported, because I truly believe that it takes a lot more to deport 100,000 people. But the security, I worked so hard. I have a car, I have a job. It has taken me so long to get where I am. And sometimes I look back and I'm like, I'm not where I should be. Because I'm 26 years old and I should be where all my friends are. So I have to start comparing myself. But for this first time, there's a fear. And it's the fear of the media, it's the fear of all these things that you hear. But I remind myself, and God reminds me, God did not make me go through that path. I did not go through all of that so that we could get kicked out. I don't blame a president. I don't give one president a good thumbs up for passing DACA and a bad thumbs up for taking DACA, because at one point we knew this was going to happen. And I recently just heard that it's not about the presidential campaigns. Yeah, Trump used DACA as a campaign and to get his vote, but it's not about that. It's more than that. It's about putting our voice together, because DACA came to be from all the fighters, from people who decided to risk everything, to decided to go to Yale and feel proud of being there. And that's what it's all about. So if you're not a DACA, or if you're DACA, or if this is the first time hearing it, pay a little bit more attention, because it's more than that. Educate yourself, and that's the most important thing. I'll leave you with that. I have a friend who at his job, there's some Trump voters, and came and asked him, can you tell me more a little bit about DACA? By the way, he loves Trump. Because the guy had no idea what DACA is. To him, DACA are people who are taking from the government, who are taking the jobs. Wrong. And so many people in the mainstream believe what Facebook, what Twitter, what all these media sources put out there, because they choose to. We live in a society that we're very lazy. We rather just hear than read. But when you educate someone, even a Trump supporter, or what a DACA person is, we pay taxes, we don't get any welfare, we don't get any financial aid, we don't get nothing, we work for everything. We literally only have a licensed drivers and a social security to back us up. That's what we have. When you educate someone, you'll be surprised their look and their reactions. Like, so wait, why do we want to deport you, kind of thing? So don't hate, educate. As in for now, when people talk to me down about President Trump, or it's not about him. DACA is not about him. DACA it's about us. DACA is about the future that we have. Because guys, 800,000 people, we make a lot of contributions to the economy, to the society, in any form, way, or shape. So I leave you with a quote of Nelson. Sorry, I have to turn to my notes. I got off on my notes. But Nelson Mandela, which I know you guys probably know, he says education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And I truly believe that's what we can do with DACA. So you have any questions, please ask me, and thank you for having me, and that's pretty much about me.
So Anna, help us here with the legal landscape, please. Yes, please help us some. Thank you, Anna. Helmo.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me. Thank you to everyone else on the panel. These are some very brave souls up here. I mean, I do this every day, and I still get emotional every time I hear these stories because they really are, human stories. This is, like they were saying, illegal or legal, undocumented. They're still human beings. They have the same emotions we do. So I'm gonna start by giving you a little background on myself, and I'm gonna do that because I think like maybe a lot of you can relate. I grew up in Elizabeth. I'm an immigrant. I was born in Cuba. Came here with my family when I was 4 years old. My mom is in the audience. She works at Kane for everybody. She's in the administration here. So we came here when I was 4. I actually started out in bilingual classes when they didn't have it in kindergarten, but in first grade. And then I got into the G&T program in Elizabeth, and by the time I graduated high school, graduated top of my class, and ended up going to UPenn in Ivy League for undergrad, and then, thank you. And then came out and eventually through just life circumstances kind of got involved in immigration law, started working. I majored in finance in undergrad, so it's a little bit of a shift. I started working for an attorney who had just graduated from law school, maybe just 2 years earlier, and he knew nothing about the business aspect of running a law office, but he was really a great attorney, and he was looking for someone to help him out, and that's how I got into it. I said, all right, I'll run your practice, and eventually I started doing the legal work, and after years and years of working for him, I said, I'm gonna go to law school, and that's what I did. I went to Seton Hall Law, graduated in 2011. Afterwards, I did a clerkship for 1 year with a state law judge, only because I had never been exposed to that kind of law, and I just wanted to make sure before I went into immigration law that it was what I wanted to do. And it was a great experience. Till this day, the judge and I are in contact, and it was just a great experience. And if anyone's interested in law school, I would definitely recommend doing that. And then after I did that clerkship, I decided state law is not for me. I want to do immigration law, and so I started my own practice. I started in Newark. I rented a little tiny space from a friend who was a criminal attorney. And then after that, I was able, after a year and a half, 2 years, I ended up getting a bigger space in Elizabeth, right on Elmore Avenue. I practice immigration law pretty much exclusively. For me, this is not a criticism of other attorneys. I just think I wanted to specialize in something. I'm just kind of like a perfectionist in that way, so I wanted to, if I was gonna practice a law, I wanted to be an expert in it. So that's what I do. I do immigration law, and I guess I could kind of consider myself an expert in it. So that's me. Just if you know, I am always available if anyone wants to talk about college, law school, anything like that, starting your own practice. Please feel free, reach out to Frank. He has my info, and feel free to contact me. Likewise, with the immigration stuff I'm gonna talk about, whether it's something personal or a family or anything, if you want some kind of advice, I will not charge you. You can feel comfortable. I will be as honest as I can be with you. So let's move on to the immigration law part, because I'm sure a lot of you are like, well, what is DACA? And I'm gonna start briefly by discussing a history of immigration law, so we kind of understand the context, and then I'll discuss a little bit, and I'll keep it brief. I'm gonna be mentioning stuff from the 1800s, but I promise this is gonna be like a 10-minute thing. Then I'll go into the current legal landscape, what changed from Obama to Trump, what's gonna happen with these DACA recipients. Let's start with the history of immigration law and how did we get here? How did we end up with 11 million undocumented people in this country? I'm sure everyone has heard that, that expression, why don't they just get in line? You know, my family came here legally, why don't theirs? Well, let's start off with the fact that there were no rules to get into the US. Anyone could just show up at a border, Ellis Island, and just ask for admission into the country up until like the 1920s. That was when we had our first quota system, when we first started setting limits on people that can come into this country. Before then, you know, during the Irish famine, millions and millions of the Irish just showed up here at Ellis Island without a visa, without any invitation or anything, and they asked for admission into the country, and they were allowed in because we didn't have any requirements back then for you to apply for a visa like we do today. So it's kind of like when people say that, it's not factual, it's like comparing apples and oranges. There were no requirements back then. Nowadays, if you want to come into this country, you must apply to come here. So, you know, I think that's something that we need to keep in mind when we discuss why we have this undocumented population. Between 1880 and 1890, 5 million people showed up at our borders and asked for admission into this country. 5 million. And there were only 50 million people at the time. It ended up being, at one point, the foreign population in the late 1800s was 15% of the country. Today, it's 13%. So even though there's this perception that it's, you know, undocumented immigration and immigration in general is just out of control, well, when you look at it historically, it's actually not that crazy. So then the very first time they started excluding people from this country was the Chinese Exclusion Act, for the same reasons that we, you know, a lot of the same derogatory comments we hear about immigrants today, they used to say the same thing about the Chinese back then. They're taking all our jobs, they're not like us, they can't assimilate. So in the US, the very first law that prevented people from immigrating to this country was the Chinese Exclusion Act, and that was in the late 1800s. I don't know the exact days, the late 1800s. And they kept extending it and extending it. Eventually, they started setting quotas on the people that can come here, how many people can come from each country. That was in the 1920s. And then eventually, the current system that we have now was implemented in 1965. The Immigration and Nationality Act was implemented in 1952. But then it was amended, and it has essentially been unchanged since 1965. So if you wonder, I mean, just think about how much the world has changed since 1965, and perhaps our current immigration laws aren't reflecting those changes and aren't reflecting the realities of our world today, and that's why we have the problems we do with immigration. But they implemented this quota system, and at the same time, people from Mexico, there used to be a program where people from Mexico could just come, work here, and legally, and then just go back to Mexico. So that was called the Bracero program. And millions of people took advantage of it, and millions of Mexicans used to come here through that program. And because they were allowed to just cross back and forth, there was no need for them to relocate their families here. Most of them their families remained in Mexico. They'd come here, they'd work, and then they'd go back. It was in the 60s, I believe, that they eliminated that program. And that's when you started seeing the rise of illegal immigration. Or people coming here and staying here with their families illegally. By the 80s, we already had about 4 million undocumented, 3 or 4 million undocumented people in the country. And, Reagan signed into law an amnesty to give these people status. And at the same time, he also signed into law certain policies to start enforcing the laws more. And so they started cracking down on immigrants, and there's now no longer this program where people can come and go. So what do people do? They just come. Now they just have to stay. And then they're like, well, I'm not going to stay here without my family. So they start bringing their family over like, you know, these guys came over. By the 1990s, President Clinton, and this is why what she mentioned about it's not a Democrat and Republican issue, it's so true. President Clinton signed the toughest immigration law in history. He signed a bill into law. It made it incredibly difficult for anyone. It passed in 1996, and I don't remember the exact name, American Anti-Terrorism something or other. But it made it incredibly difficult for someone who is here undocumented to be able to get any sort of status. So after that, so between getting rid of the Bracero program and now, you know, increasing enforcement, but this new law in the 90s that not only is it making it, increasing the categories of deportability, but it's also making it more difficult for people who are already here to be able to get any kind of lawful status. So when you say, why don't these people just get in the back of the line, it's because there is none. Let me give you a few examples. For you to be able, if you're a US citizen, you want to travel right now to, let's say, France, let's go to Paris, let's go to Rome. You don't need a visa. You as an American citizen could just buy your ticket to South Africa, to Thailand. You can buy your ticket, get on a plane, and go over there for a vacation. Most of the world cannot do that to come into the US. There are only about 38 countries where their citizens are allowed to come here without a visa. It's a very restricted program. First of all, they're almost all Western European countries, and it's a very restricted program. It's only 90 days they're allowed to be here. They can't change their status, et cetera, et cetera. But for the rest of the world, for you to come into this country, even to go to Disneyland, you need to apply for a visa, okay? And the majority, the large majority of people who apply for visas are denied. For tourist visas are denied, okay? So you can't come here as a tourist unless you apply for a visa. You certainly can't come here and stay here forever unless you apply for permanent residence or a green card. That's what, you know, the everyday lingo is. And you have to be a green card holder for certain years to then be able to apply for citizenship. So the paths for you to be able to even get here, for instance, for you to be able to get a visa as a tourist or as a student, or then to be able to get a visa as a permanent resident, they're very limited. You can only get a visa, you can only come here and get permanent residence here if you have an immediate relative who's a citizen or a permanent resident who petitions for you, or you have an employer who petitions for you, okay? However, many of those categories have years and years of wait, of a backlog. So if you're a US citizen and you wanna bring your child over here, but he's already over 21, that's about a 6-year wait, 7 year wait. Who can just put their life on hold like that? If you're a US citizen, you wanna bring over your sibling, that's a 12-year wait. Okay, so it's not as simple as just getting in line. First, you need the petition, either the relative or the employer to petition you. Second, with the employment, it's incredibly complicated. Employers have to go through a process where they show there aren't Americans willing to take the job. It's not easy. You can't just get someone to like, hey, I want him to work for me. It's not like that. It's very complicated. So you need one of these paths, and there's probably a backlog in that category. So it may be years before you're actually able to get your green card based on that. So there is essentially no line. The line is very long, and there may not be a line depending on your situation. Now, in addition to all of that I just mentioned, all those obstacles, if you are here undocumented, even one day, all of those avenues that I just mentioned aren't available to you. Because once you're undocumented here, you're disqualified from any kind of employment petition at all. And you're essentially only people who are undocumented, who are the spouse of a US citizen, parent, or minor child under 21 of a US citizen can apply for their green card even though they're undocumented, okay? So you hear about people getting married for their papers. That's why, because it's one of the very few paths available for people. If you are here undocumented, but you are, let's say, the spouse of a permanent resident, you can't apply for your green card, here. You have to leave the country. You have to go back to the embassy in the American embassy in your country and apply through there. There's a little caveat. If you were here unlawfully, at the moment you depart, you can't come back for 10 years. So you can apply for a waiver, but then you have to leave the country, wait months and months for the waiver to be decided. It's discretionary, so they may say, no, we don't want you here, and then you're stuck. It's not, it's immigration law is very complex, and I just want you to realize that it's not as simple as getting them back at the line, because there is no line. There is no way that you can just say, hey, I'm a good person, I pay taxes, I have a college degree, please let me stay here lawfully. I have no criminal record, none of that matters. If you don't fit into one of these categories, then you're pretty much out of luck. Okay, so that's how we ended up in the situation that we are here. Please don't take this as like a political opinion on like enforcement versus benefits or whatever. I'm just kind of really trying to explain how did this happen. And the more, I think it was certainly an unintended consequence of increasing enforcement and this 1996 law that they passed, that it just made it so difficult for people to legalize their status that they have no choice. They just have to stay unlawful. And let's think about this. If you're here undocumented, you don't have a social security number unless you're using someone else's and you get a job, you do that to get a job. So let's say you don't have a social, but now you're using some made up number, someone else's social, so you can actually work. All those taxes you're paying, because when you get paid with a paycheck, taxes are automatically deducted. Those taxes you're paying into the Social Security fund, Medicaid fund, you may never see any of that, because contrary to popular belief or to some notions out there, you are not eligible for any federally means-tested benefits unless you've been a permanent resident, you have a green card for at least 5 years, or you're a U.S. citizen. No exceptions. There's no like, oh, I'm just going to pretend, I'll just show them a fake card or something. No, I think, we're in a pretty digital society now. They can figure it out if you're really not that person. So these people are paying taxes into funds. They may never get it. They can't get a license. These students have to pay, in many states, have to pay out-of-state tuition. They can't get a scholarship. Parents that can't buy a house, can't get a credit card. Who wants to live like that? This notion that people want to be undocumented is kind of, it's a little silly. Or it's certainly a little just ignorant of the reality. No one wants to be undocumented. So if they had a path, I promise you, people come to me every day asking me, how can I legalize my status? And so many times I have to say, there's just nothing I can do. There's nothing, there's no path available. So now I'm gonna talk a little bit about the current legal landscape and the differences, like what changed from Obama to Trump. The number one thing that changed is the use of prosecutorial discretion. Listen to this word, it's very important. Just imagine a criminal case. The prosecutor has the choice of what he's going to charge you with, right? Like, let's say you get arrested and you have some marijuana on you. They can charge you with possession. They can charge you with paraphernalia. They can charge you with so many different. So the prosecutor has a lot of discretion in what they're going to charge you. Immigration prosecutors are the same. They have the discretion to charge you with these deportation grounds and put you in deportation proceedings. They also have the discretion to stop those proceedings. They have the discretion to not put you in proceedings at all. That's called prosecutorial discretion. So as they mentioned, I forgot who mentioned about, for many years, there have been proposals in Congress for reform, for immigration reform. The DREAM Act, in particularly, has been proposed for 16 years now. They've been proposing it. There was an immigration reform bill that was passed in, I believe it was 2012, by the Gang of Eight, bipartisan group of Republican and Democratic senators. However, it did not pass the House. there has not been a change in the law by Congress, even though there have been many attempts for many years. What Obama did was he used his prosecutorial discretion as the head of the executive branch to say, all right, these kids who came here before all DACA recipients came here before they were 16 years old. They've been here since at least June of 2007. They have either graduated from high school here or have gotten their GED or are in the military or are currently in school, and they have no criminal record, or at least nothing serious, even two little tiny, like 2 noise ordinances. More than 2 noise ordinances could get you disqualified from DACA. That's how it's, how tough they are with criminal history. So Obama basically said, I'm going to take these group of kids and send them to the back of the deportation line. We have 11 million undocumented people here. We can't deport them all at once. We just don't have the resources to do it. We have to have some kind of priority system. So Obama implemented a very clear priority system. 3 categories of priorities. If you fall into one of these categories, mainly like people with criminal history, old deportation orders, things like that, if you fall into these categories, recent border crossers, we will go after you. Like, we will use our resources to try to deport you. But if you don't fall into one of these categories, like let's say you've been here 20 years, you've been paying taxes, you don't have no criminal history, you have kids here, then we're going to essentially send you to the back of the line. We're not going to use our resources to try to deport you. And so that, it was incredibly helpful to the immigrant community that use of prosecutorial discretion. DACA is a type of prosecutorial discretion. It's deferred action for childhood arrivals. It's essentially, like I was saying, they're now sent to the back of the line. They're not going to make them deportation priorities. They're not going to put them in proceedings. If they're already in proceedings, they're not going to physically deport them. And they'll also give them, in the meantime, a work permit. And finally, with this work permit, they can get a Social Security number, a valid Social Security number, and a license. So that's all Obama did. He essentially said, these kids, we're sending them, and we're going to concentrate on these other people for deportation purposes. Keep in mind that Obama was nicknamed the deporter-in-chief by immigrant rights activists because he had deported more people than anyone before him. The difference is that he had very clear priorities, and most of the people that he deported were at the border, versus right now, there aren't as many people showing up to the border, and Trump is concentrating on internal enforcement. So the biggest thing that has changed from Obama to Trump is that Trump has essentially gotten rid of prosecutorial discretion. DACA is one of those. Before, if I had a client that was not a priority, I can negotiate with the prosecutor. Let's administratively close this case, blah, blah, blah. This person has something pending, or if the person already had an outstanding deportation order, because they were ordered, let's say they crossed the border 20 years ago, were ordered deported back then, but they gave them a stay of removal for humanitarian reasons. There are people who have those stays of removals, who have old orders, but have been reporting annually to immigration for years, 7, 8, 10 years, and now are showing up, and they're telling them, pack your bags. They'll either detain them on the spot, or they'll tell them, come back next week with a bag ready to leave the country. And these are people who have, the only offense they have committed was this immigration offense for, all the reasons I explained earlier. So that is the biggest change now with Obama and Trump. That use of prosecutorial discretion. Trump is essentially, there are no deportation priorities anymore. Everyone is a priority. Doesn't matter what your criminal history is, how long you've lived here, what your family ties is, what your property or business ties are. He'll deport someone who owns a business, and he did. I mean, it was in the news, some guy, I want to say it was like in Texas, that was a restaurant owner. The community loved him. The community had actually voted for Trump. And now this guy's getting deported, and they were like, wait, this isn't the bad hombre we were talking about, you know what I mean? So it's That's really the biggest difference. And with regards to DACA and the DREAM Act and moving forward, you know, everything's up in the air right now, so who knows? Who knows what Congress will come up with? As of right now, DACA is done. I believe someone from the Attorney General's office, Sessions office, said that they will not extend it. Today's October 5th, right? Today is the deadline, was the deadline, if you wanted to renew your DACA. Excuse me, tomorrow. So tomorrow's the deadline if you want to renew DACA. They have to receive it by tomorrow, but that's only a couple of, you know, a few people that get to actually do that, not everyone with DACA. Trump has said that during these 6 months, while we're waiting to see what Congress does, that he's not gonna take any action, any enforcement action against DACA recipients. But just from a legal standpoint, the minute that they lose that DACA status, they go back to the status they had before. If they didn't have any status before, they go back to being undocumented and at risk of being deported. And now, immigration has all their information. There are millions of people in this country that immigration has no idea they're here, they're undocumented. But with these DACA recipients, they turned in, proactively provided immigration with their information, with the assurances that this was a program that was going to help them out. And now immigration has that information, and there are bills in Congress to prevent them from using it to deport these students, these kids. But who knows? I mean, like, who knows what Trump is going to do or what they're going to do? They can use that information under the law if they want right now to deport these students and these DACA recipients. So it's an incredibly urgent situation. And, you know, what we can do as a community is, number one, be there for them. As a school, in your jobs, and there are many ways that you can be there for them. And help them with they have to, you know, plan. Imagine at your age having to plan in case you have to leave the country. Right now, you should be thinking college and, you know, one day getting married and having kids and buying a house and a career and all these things. And you're thinking, okay, well, you know, next year I may be in another country. So it's incredibly, it's sad. And it's urgent. And it's urgent for us to make sure Congress takes action. And the big issue right now in Congress is that you have this battle between the Democrats and the Republicans on what type of bill. The Democrats want a clean DACA bill with no other provisions attached, and there are no other strings attached. And Congress is saying, the Republicans are saying, no, we're not going to do the DREAM Act unless we can also, you know, get the money for the border wall and like 15,000 more deportation officers and blah, blah, blah. And like I'm so sorry, at the end, Alvaro mentioned it's a real struggle. It's a real, you know, it's a double-edged sword for these DACA recipients, because more enforcement means that more of their families are going to get deported. So what? They get to stay here, but then now everyone else is in more risk. So I understand the sentiment of we got to fight for everybody, not just the DACA students. However, I'm just saying what I perceive right now from just what's going on realistically, you know, it's going to be hard to get that clean DACA bill. We'll see. It's going to be hard to get a DACA bill. They've been doing this for 16 years. They've been trying to get a DREAM Act, and they haven't. So at this point, you know, I think we may have to settle for less than the ideal. However, I understand that need to fight for everybody, and it's true. You have to. If you just ignore this group of people, then they'll just give you the little bit that you say. You always negotiate starting from higher. But I think like I said, what you could do is get more involved with Congress, you know, show your support for this bill, and show your support for for the students who are in the school, who are in that position, who have family in that position. Be understanding. And be understanding, like on Facebook, when you see these dumb memes about, like what I was saying, get in the line and this and that. if it was that easy, if the immigration law could just be summed up in one meme, I wouldn't, you didn't have law school. Like I spent I don't know how many countless hours learning immigration law. Until this day, I learned something new. So yeah, I think that's where I want to leave it at. Just yeah, be a big support for them because they need it, and there are a lot of amazing resources. Cosecha is a fantastic organization. I actually worked with Catalina. At We Are One for a while when she was there, and get involved with Congress. That's because right now it's in their hand. Trump can do whatever he wants with DACA. There is no law that forces him to keep it in place. So, and keep in mind when they challenged DAPA in the Supreme Court, it was a split decision, and now.
They want to tell them what that acronym is, DAPA.
Yeah, DAPA was Deferred Action for Parents. So they, Obama, after he passed DACA, then tried to do something similar for parents, for parents of citizens and permanent residents who had been here many years, no criminal history. But when he implemented that program, a group of Republican governors challenged it. I believe it was in the Fifth Circuit in Texas, and then they ruled against Obama. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and at the time, the court was only 8 justices. What's his name, Scalia, had died, and so the court was split. But right now, the court is majority conservative because Trump just appointed a justice. So if it goes back up to the Supreme Court, if DACA, the issue of DACA, goes up to, oh, that's something I forgot to mention. Why did Trump get rid of it in the first place? Is because that group of governors that sued in the DAPA case are now threatening to sue for DACA and to get rid of DACA. So they gave Trump a deadline of September 5th to let us know what you're going to do. Are you keeping this program in place? Because if you are, we're going to sue for the court to rule it unconstitutional. And because the court in the DAPA case was split, it's likely, or it's very possible that in this case they'll rule against DACA as well. So at this point, I think Congress may be the only hope to get some reform for them, for DACA and for everybody that's undocumented. And one other thing I just want to say, with regards to our representatives, keep in mind that our local representatives are just as important as voting for the president. I mean, that's incredibly important, but it's just as important for you to go out and vote in your state elections for local representatives, because those are the guys writing the laws. Your senator, your congressman, they write the laws. And so it's just as important to get involved in those elections, and to us. If we want people to represent us, then we need to get into those positions. You need to start putting people in those positions that represent you. So keep that in mind when it comes to election times. It's not just the national election, the presidential election that counts. These state elections are really important too. That's it. That's it.
So thank you for that very rich legal overview. It's very fascinating and insightful. As far as Congress, let me build on that. I was searching here for a moment, a quote from Mark Twain, one of my favorites. Suppose you were an idiot, and suppose you were a member of Congress, but I repeat myself. So that is sort of my sense about the Congress, my optimism as far as the Congress is concerned. This is having worked in it, I might add, but that's another story. I want to just add a couple other points and throw it open to the audience for some questions. I think we have 10, 15 minutes, would you say, or that's about right? Yes, all right. So I wanted to just add that the upsurge, and my students are here, so I want to make sure we tie this into NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, that with the North American Free Trade Agreement, and when that is passed in the 1990s, that ends up, because we always think about how it affects the United States, right, and the displacement of auto workers, mostly in the Midwest. But what ends up happening also is that big agricultural corporations dump a lot of corn into Mexico, undercutting their prices and displacing a lot of Mexican farmers. So a lot of Mexican farmers have to make difficult decisions. Do we lose our land, or do we send somebody to El Norte, meaning the United States? And so there are a lot of decisions that were made at that time. So this spike in undocumented immigration really can be traced to the mid-90s, early 2000s, and the fact that we have so many Mexican Americans in our region, because historically speaking, most of the immigrants from Latin America to our region had been from Puerto Rico. Well, Puerto Ricans aren't immigrants, but from Cuba, the Dominican Republic, had been from the Caribbean. But starting in around 2000 or so, we start to see a large spike in the Mexican immigration to our region. So I just wanted to provide that as a little background. I also want to acknowledge Giancarlo Tello has arrived here. Giancarlo is one of the major leaders of the Dreamers. He's a graduate student at Rowan University and very proud of his work here. I also want to make one other quick point, that a lot of students that have been leaders in among the Dreamers have come, in fact, from Kane. And I'm thinking of Carlos Rojas Rodriguez, who is a member of Cosecha, which is an organization that several folks have mentioned here that trains folks to become active in the community, to spread the word about immigration reform, to be leaders. So Carlos couldn't be here because he's leaving for Peru. I think he's on his jet right now. So anyway, but I just wanted to acknowledge him and his tie in to Kane. I think that's important. So anyway, is that microphone working down there? So if you have a question for any of the panelists, please come on up and raise your question or concern or thoughts, whatever you'd like to do. Don't be shy. I'm hoping some of my students will show a leadership position. Yes, come right on up, please. It's just so everyone can hear you. And if you didn't say your name and so forth.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joanna. I just wanted to ask the immigration lawyer more about, I know all of you are from Mexico who crossed the border, but there are also immigrants who came here through planes. So I wanted, maybe you could touch more based on that and talk about how that process is like for other immigrants.
Yeah, so right now about 40% of the, I'm so loud, don't worry. Right now about 40% of the undocumented population here in the US actually arrived legally. They came in with visas and then they just overstay. So when you get a visa to come here, it's usually for a certain amount of time. They usually give you about 6 months to be here. And if you don't leave, then as soon as that time expires, then you're considered undocumented and without status. So yeah, that's another way that people do get here. It's not just crossing the border. About half almost of the population that's undocumented entered legally. So.
Anyone of the other panelists want to add to that? I have a quick point on that. Yeah, we actually gave a talk about the wall. That's why the wall makes no sense historically. Again, I don't want to lead into another panel discussion, but the wall doesn't make much sense as a policy idea because most I would say now don't actually come across that way. They fly in to the United States and overstay their visas. So the wall will not address that. So anyway, that's just to follow up on that point. Any other questions or?
Just to follow up on that point about the wall, I want to address that. Just to keep in mind that a lot of the people that, I forgot the exact number, but I believe about 40,000 people that entered through the border last year were unaccompanied minors and families who never tried to even evade immigration. They would show up at the border and turn themselves into immigration so they can apply for asylum. And under international law and our own law, we must allow them. If someone shows up at any of our courts of entry and requests asylum, we must give them the opportunity to apply. So a wall really won't stop those people from coming either because they're turning themselves to immigration to apply for asylum. And why they're coming, there's a lot of, I'm sure you can get into like all the politics on why they're just a lot of violence right now in Central America, gang-related violence.
Other questions? Yes, come on up, please. I love your shirt, I might add.
I have two questions for the immigration lawyer. One of my friends was telling me about.
Could you speak up, please?
Sorry, is it on? Hello. Okay. One of my friends was telling me about the wet foot, dry foot policy and how it affects like their family members. I don't know how exactly it works, but I know that like certain people who came from Cuba do have a visa. But does that take away with them as well?
So let me repeat the question in case not everyone heard it. So the student is asking about the wet foot, dry foot policy, and I take it Obama's suspension of that in the final weeks of his administration and the impact on Cubans. So did you want to address that?
Sure. So the wet foot, dry foot policy, Cuba has always kind of been, they've had special treatment under immigration law. They essentially, and this was implemented by Clinton, the wet foot, dry foot policy. And what it held was that if you're a Cuban national, you're a citizen of Cuba, and you made it to U.S. territory, then they can't send you back to Cuba. They must let you into the U.S. That was only for Cubans. There have been parole programs similar to that for Haitians. There aren't any right now. But Obama, at the end, just a couple weeks before his term expired, he got rid of wet foot, dry foot. So now, any Cuban who shows up before a Cuban would show up at the border and they would just say, I'm Cuban and I want to come in, and they would just be allowed in. And now that's not the case anymore. Now they're essentially treated like every other national when they show up at the border. So, I mean, how it affects Cubans, it's going to obviously affect them a lot. There were a lot of people who were already, a lot of Cubans who were already en route they had gone through Central America and made the trek all the way up to Mexico to try to make it to the U.S. border, and then they got rid of this program, and so now they're all kind of stuck in Central America, in different parts of Central America. Some are in Panama, some are in Mexico. So it affects Cuban nationals in that they are no longer allowed to just show up here. They have to find their way here like everybody else.
Did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, and then I had a second question. I know a student who is a permanent resident. Would that affect their ability to stay here, or would they be fine with the review?
No. Once you're a permanent resident, you have a green card, which means unless you commit a crime that makes you deportable, then you can stay here permanently. You can stay here forever. So none of these laws that we've been discussing, they wouldn't affect them. But I mean, like, you can be deported, but if you commit certain crimes. However, you're allowed to remain here as long as you don't commit any deportable crimes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see someone else. You're coming to the microphone? Yes. Wonderful.
Hello. Okay, hi. I don't actually attend Keene, but I'm a DACA recipient. And I just had the question of, I finished all my prereqs for nursing, and the schools that I wanted to attend, they only allow you if you have a permanent residence or citizenship. So what would that mean? Are there schools that allow DACA recipients to apply?
So in our advocacy, I'd like to ask you later which schools those are, but in our advocacy, we have a don't ask, don't tell policy about this. That is, many universities allow DACA recipients to come into the university and don't make them eligible for financial aid, and they don't make permanent residency or citizenship a requirement of enrollment. But it's every university administrator I've spoken to, there's a fuzzy line here because the federal government has some rules, and so the universities have some discretion. So some universities don't, just don't really care so much about your immigration status and so forth. So I'd be interested to find out where they're requiring you to actually be a permanent resident or a citizen, but maybe we can have that conversation later. I see Giancarlo has his hand up, but did you want to add, did anyone else want to add anything to that? So, do you want to come up, Giancarlo? So people can hear you perhaps?
So specifically for that nursing question, the one that actually would give you the license to practice would be the State Board of Nursing. They're the ones that would give you the professional license. And this is an issue that has come up in the past with other universities such as Rutgers, the School of Nursing program. What the deans there have been saying in the past is that we don't think you would be certified to be practiced as a nurse, therefore we won't admit you because we think it would be a waste of time. That's silly reasoning. If you can afford it and you want to learn, you should be able to get it. And when we've spoken to universities, and by we, I mean myself and other colleagues, they've accepted that understanding. And B, New Jersey, the Board of Nursing does currently license DACA recipients to be able to practice nursing. So I already know of several DACA folks and different programs. So Frank is a good resource, and feel free to talk with me if anyone has more questions regarding specifically professional licenses. Nursing is specific, but there are still other fields where we still don't know enough yet, such as becoming a lawyer in New Jersey, if DACA is enough for you to be able to practice or obtain that license. So yeah, just clarify that.
Thank you for that clarification. Wonderful. Other questions? Would you like to come up and?
Just hoping to contextualize the wet foot, dry foot act being revoked a little bit. Was there any connection made in the rhetoric surrounding that policy shift to President Obama normalizing U.S. relations with Cuba? And was that connection, made explicit? Or can any inferences be drawn around that? Because it seems as if, like those two events, don't exist in a, like they're interconnected. So
thank you for the question. I'll turn it over to Anna in a minute for her legal perspective. Let me say as a historian, that the Cuban government had requested the end of that policy. And they had been negotiating since Obama's and Raul Castro had opened up relations. I think it's December 2014 was the breakthrough, right? And so one of the things that the Cuban government right away wanted was to end any preference in immigration for Cubans, because their argument was, by your having this policy, it encourages a brain drain in Cuba, you're hurting our country, and you should, if we're going to normalize relations, treat us the same with regards to immigration as every other country. So at the end, Obama did that as looks to me like an overture to the Cuban government to strengthen that process of the ongoing rapprochement with Cuba, between Cuba and the United States. I think that's the political context of why he did that. Friends and I have debated, I'd love to hear Anna's thought on this, whether it actually has much impact at all, because there's something called the Cuban Adjustment Act of 1965 or 66, which also gives Cubans a fair amount of protection when they come here. So we've often debated, I've been at forums, does the wet foot, dry foot policy actually make any difference? Because Cubans seemingly still have preference through the Cuban Adjustment Act because they're fleeing a communist country that our relationship is still somewhat tenuous with. I don't know if you want to add that.
Sure. I think, okay, so first regarding the revocation of wet foot, dry foot, I think it was probably a concession in exchange for the Cuban government to start accepting deportees, people who were ordered deported from the U.S. We have a lot of Cuban nationals here who have been ordered deported for committing certain crimes, and they haven't been able to physically deport them because the Cuban government won't accept them. And it's not just Cuba. There are a few countries that don't accept their nationals from us when we deport them. So I believe that maybe it was Obama trying to, that was his concession, like, okay, we'll get rid of wet foot, dry foot, and in exchange, you start taking these these people who have been already deported. And there was a list where I believe of a couple of thousand where Cuba had already agreed to accept those. So I think that was probably the negotiation. With regards to wet foot, dry foot, and its effect on Cuban adjustment, it does have a practical effect, because in order to be eligible for Cuban adjustment, you must have been admitted into the country lawfully. You can't just cross the border as a Cuban and be here for 1 year and apply for Cuban adjustment. You have to have been paroled or admitted into the country. Parole is like a temporary kind of admission into the country. And you must be here for a year after having been admitted or paroled. So if you can't before, a Cuban national could just show up at the border, get that admission, that legal admission. They would be given like a little document called a parole, and 1 year later, they can apply for the green card under the Cuban Adjustment Act. Now, without the ability, they don't have that parole available anymore. So without that, the only way a Cuban could apply for Cuban adjustment is if they made it here legally, like anybody else, applied for some kind of visa, and then once they're here, after being here for a year, then they can apply for Cuban adjustment. What I have seen, a lot of Cubans have dual nationality with Spain, and Spain is one of those countries where you don't need a visa to come into the U.S. So a lot of Cubans have been getting Spanish nationality to then use that citizenship, that passport, to come in. But that's a problem, because, like I was explaining, that's a very restricted program, that visa waiver program. One of the restrictions is that if you're here past the 90 days, then immigration could put you in deportation proceedings, and you have no right to fight it. So even if you're Cuban and you'll be eligible for a green card in a year from now under the Cuban adjustment, right now at the moment you're not. And you have no right to even go before a judge and ask for bond or fight it. They have the right to grab you, put you on a plane, send you right back to Spain if that's the nationality you use to come in. So there is a practical effect. The revocation of it does have a practical effect on Cuban adjustment. It certainly has limited how people can apply for Cuban adjustment. Before, you could just show up at the border and paroled in, and a year later you apply for a green card. It's not available anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Oh, yes, come right on up. Come on down.
Yes, I'm currently studying to be I'm an education major here. I just have a question for the three panelists. What do you feel were the most effective ways that your teachers, if any, reached out to you or helped your ease in the transition as you went through your elementary, middle, and high school days? Like, what were the most effective ways that the teachers did to ease your transition through the DACA program?
Andrew, what specific area are you planning to teach in, or what specific grade?
I want to do secondary education, but I'm asking more for across the border.
Right. You want to start there,
No,
Aldo?
we go first.
So basically, certain teachers knew from middle school my status. That's when I became a little bit more open towards it. Very few teachers knew, and the teachers that didn't know, they were supportive. They were I turned, the law of DACA was told in 2012, I had to be 15. I still wasn't 15, and they would be I know you're anxious, I know you're excited to apply for DACA, there's a few years, hold on. But they would motivate me. They would tell me, if I needed help with any subject, they would be there. They would, guide me through, that transition into, finally being out of the shadows and into the light, I guess you could say. They would, motivate me. They would, email me at times, how are you doing during the summer? Are you okay? Do you need help? Do you want, to be tutored a little bit more to, advance in any other subject that I was going to take? Finally, in my high school, I joined the AVID program, which stands for Advanced Via Individual Determination. I don't know if you know about it. So it's like a college-ready kind of program that I have to take the 4 years of my high school. I have the same teacher throughout, my high school. the going into like the first months of my first, high school year, I decided I was gonna have a talk to her, become open to her and tell her my story and tell her like my status. And she kind of like did cry because of the fact that, she saw the pain through my eyes. She saw the things that I went through, and she saw that like I wanted to cry too. But, she just like grabbed me, and like gently, not like bad. And she told me, "You're gonna be fine. You're gonna apply when you turn 15, and I'm gonna help you because I can see the good in you." And, she told me that I could and that I will succeed in life. And, this year, it's kind of like nerve-wracking and stressful because of everything that's going on. And we sat down and I saw my GPA and I was kind of impressed, to be quite honest. I worked my whole life in high school, studying. And, she told me, like, I don't know what's gonna happen. Because, like, I was in a news conference and I told my story out into the public about how I was, scared. We are scared. And, she's like, I know that you were scared of what might happen in the future and, you're uncertain and, there's so many things happening, but we're going to apply to colleges. Like, I'm going to help you. Like, I'm here to guide you because I know you're a first, generation student going into college and, it is scary, but throughout the 4 years, she too, as my mom and dad taught me that, yes, DACA was like a tiny step, and now they want to take it away from us. But we're gonna apply to colleges. She basically told me, like, you if they accept you, amazing. You're in, because like you have so much potential. Like we all have potential. Like all DACA students have potential, and what I've seen so far is that I'm not gonna say like other students who are from here like don't have this, but like especially for us, I've seen that when we choose a career, it's because we know it's calling us and telling us, I know you're gonna like have so much passion for me, so I'm calling to you, and this is what I feel like you are made for. And I told her, I was like, I want to become an immigration attorney. And she just like kind of teared up and she's like, I see it for you. And I know it's gonna be a tough road, but at the end you're gonna be like, it was all worth it. So my teachers have been there. They've given me strength. They've built my confidence. And my mentors as well, like Frank, they've built me up, in a sense that I believe that anything is possible. Anything, our opportunities and whatnot are endless. We just have to believe in ourselves and grasp ourselves and say, like, we're gonna get through this, because it's like we've all said, we are here and we're here to fight. And, I know it feels like we're all scared right now, and I'm scared. I'm not gonna tell you I'm not scared, but my teachers are there to show me that, we're strong enough to fight and we'll get through the storm. So yeah.
All right. I remember, when I was in high school, I was a wrestler. I did wrestle for 3 years for my school. And I was one of the best wrestlers, right? And I had to tell my teachers that I wasn't documented because there were like trips that the team was picked to go to this university, Cornell University. And now we had to go there, and they asked for some documentation. So I was like, what I'm gonna do now, right? I was there already. We were supposed to be there for like full week. So I told my coach, I wasn't documented and I didn't know what to do. He took care of that, but I remember after that day he changed completely. Like, he was like, I have a lot of respect for you, you know, because I actually told my story. You know, I was living by myself here. Like, I had my sister, but I had to work, pay my rent, and go to school. And I had to wrestle. And he helped me a lot. You know, he was one of the persons that mentored me, supported me to go to college, to Brookdale, to get my associates. And my math teacher, a lot of my teachers, pretty much all my teachers knew that I wasn't documented because everybody knew about it. Like, they all talked, like, they were like, oh, we didn't know that he wasn't documented, you know? And, but after that, I actually got a lot of support from them. I remember it was this time that sometimes, like, I will, like that time at Cornell, we were supposed to make, it was a fee, like a payment to pay. I remember this teacher showed up and she's like, are you going? I was like, yes. She's like, oh, here's a check. I cover your, she covered everything. I was like, wow. She's like, I see something amazing in you that you will do great in the future. You know, those are one of the things I remember, like, you know, all my teachers were there for me on everything. My English was bad. They helped me. They were like, they took their time to explain and to teach me. Yeah, and it's really hard for me, you know, because DACA really opened doors, like they say, opened doors for me. I work. How do you call? Home improvement. I do home improvement, and since last year, I started working for my own thing, and very soon I'm opening, you know, my own company and name it. And you know, now with DACA and like, I don't know, I'm a little worried. I'm scared. Like they say, I'm kind of scared. Like, I don't know what to do now. Like, I'm on the spotlight. But yeah, all my teachers, you know, and mentors. I have mentors to go to Brookdale, and without them, I don't think I would have make it. Yep.
So Andrew, just very quickly, I'm gonna assume you're asking because you're going into education. So as a teacher, how you can provide, yes, motivate them, educate yourself on whatever issues going on, and just have the door open for them. My teachers did that for me, and as a teacher now, that's what I do for them. Just show that you care, and always motivate them, because they might not have that at home. Okay? Yeah.
Thank you, Anne. So we ought to run that in some sort of commercial or something about why teachers are important. I mean, thank you for the three of you, because that's why I went into teaching. I love it, and we train and prepare so many teachers here at Kane. So they're a great testament to what the impact a teacher can have in a student's lives. So I really was very moved by that, very much. I haven't spoken as much as I usually do. I'll be on tears here. I think we're out of time, though. You know, some of the panelists have to move along, but to other things. But I want to thank you all for coming. I hope this was hopeful and helpful in terms of the subject matter, and so we look forward to creating more of these opportunities. I see Sarah wanted to say something. So Sarah, yes.
Yeah, thank you to the, it is kind of low. Thank you to the panelists, obviously, for the power and the courage of your stories, and for helping us realize how policies and politics become personal in a meaningful way. Just a reminder that this is the first in a 4-part series that the College of Liberal Arts is putting forward. The next one is on the 30th of October, or October 30, as we say in South African English, and it's on anti-Semitism, hate, and hate in the US. So please join us then. It's the same time, probably the same venue, at 4:30 on the 30th of October. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, everyone, for coming, and have a great evening.
I think there is somebody.